My name is Amrith Bhargava and I come from India. I practice law and I am now pursuing my doctoral studies with the chairman of the Vivekananda International Foundation, Mr. Gurumurthy, who spoke in the morning. The deliberations of the last 2 days, what have we been talking about? Conflict avoidance and environment consciousness. Environment consciousness, the theme, has to be looked at from two sub-themes in the way in which I have divided them into. The first is about its reverence. Why is it revered? And the perspective on reverence. Reverence, as we all know, is very different from the aesthetic view of nature or the environment. It is to do with the soul, and that culture of the soul in respecting and worshipping nature as a part of the divine experience is what is manifested as consciousness. The importance of the sacred dimension was referred to in the morning, and how the sacred domain is central to the Hindu and Buddhist streams, especially on maintenance of the natural equilibrium, which is more contemporary and relevant, and the other paradigm of exploiting nature first and then reacting through conservation and preservation, which is subsequent. This idea of the sacred and the existence of the sacred dimension all over these two religions is an aspect of its creation itself. It is so deep that it has to be acknowledged at every point of time. I would like to read out what the Russian ambassador 20 years back to India said. It's a very profound passage and it merits our consideration. How the sacred dimension is intertwined in every aspect of our life and it cannot be separated. Modernity, especially through its growth of capitalism and the monetization and commoditization of relationships and values in terms of money, which I'll shortly refer to, the process, is significantly different from viewing the sacred dimension. The loss of the sacred dimension is an incident of modernity, and the loss of the sacred dimension will lead to the destruction of environment consciousness and eventually the environment and ecology itself. The Russian ambassador Alexander Karakin wrote, "How more profound is India's traditional world, where each stone is a hierophant, a sign of the presence of the sacred in our world. Every sunrise here becomes a cosmogonic drama. Every woman an embodiment of the tantric principle of Shakti, the feminine divinity. Behind the exterior forms, specifically only of India, hides the sublime universal paradigm of the traditional conscience, totally opposite to the modernistic one, also far more vibrant and wholesome. The craving of the human soul for sacred archetypes is unquenchable, and archetypes are easily juxtaposed with New Age constructs. The sacred and the profane coexist. This coexistence of the sacred dimension and what in the West is known as profane and extricated from religion itself, this marvelous coexistence is the essence of the Indic consciousness or the Eastern consciousness, the Hindu-Buddhist consciousness. The method of evolving this paradigm of environment consciousness, how has it been manifested? I would like to draw from an experience of the native Red Indian tribes in what is now the United States of America. Today theirs is a culture which we read about and probably look at in the museums. This has been the impact of Western universalism as opposed to Eastern universality. The salience of the two terms is a reminder that there is a big world of difference in the way nature has been viewed. In philosophy as well, which is the second realm which I will touch before we close. In fact, India's highest court, coming from the legal discipline, I have to take you back to one of its judgments in 1987, where it spoke of the Red Indian experience with lands being acquired by its colonial masters many years back, 2 centuries back. The native Red Indian chief told the American establishment, the then white establishment, every part of the earth is sacred to my people. Every shining pin needle, every sandy shore, every mist in the dark woods, every clearing and humming insect is holy in the memory and experience of my people. So, when the great chief in Washington sends word that he wishes to buy our land, he asks much of us. The great chief sends word he will reserve us a place so that we can live comfortably to ourselves. This is the principle that we follow all over the world today. You acquire land, exploit the forests, and tell the native residents, the indigenous peoples, that they will be resettled in another land. And I quote, he will be our father and we will be his children. So we will consider your offer to buy our land, but it will not be easy, for this land is sacred to us. If all the beasts were gone, man would die from a great loneliness of spirit. For whatever happens to the beast soon happens to man. This is environmental consciousness. What happens in one aspect of nature will eventually hit at us one day is the essence or the bottom line of the contribution of Eastern, Hindu, Buddhist philosophies is this. All things are connected. This is what the Red Indian chief tells the white establishment in the US. This we know. The earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth. This we know. All things are connected, like the blood which unites one family. All things are connected. There is another very important line that I would like to read. That destiny of what happens after the forests perish is a mystery for us. For we do not understand when the wild buffalo are all slaughtered, the wild horses are tamed, the sacred corners of the forest heavy with the scent of many man, and the view of the ripe hills blotted by talking wires. Industrialization. Tribals are talking about this 2 centuries back. Where is the thicket? Gone. Where is the eagle? Gone. This is the most important thing, the last line. The end of living and the beginning of survival. The entire post-industrial society, the gift that they have given to their former colonies has been that we have ensured and assured their survival. There is a difference between living and survival. That is very important, and that can be understood only in this grammar of consciousness, in the Eastern way. In fact, we have also traced the Western and Eastern approaches to the environmental question more in the philosophical realm in the morning itself, and I wouldn't want to go deep into it. But what was this strain of commoditization and itemization of values, of environmental concerns? I would read as to what an author had written in 2006 when in Netherlands a conference was held on changing worldviews. How the aspect of money has influenced the narrative. Monetary logic is not sympathetic to religion. Quantification, measurement, reducing qualitative differences to abstract generalizations, and mathematical calculations have no room for mystery. There is a mystery in creation, there is a mystery in living. That is spiritual. That is the culture of the soul in Hindu and Buddhist teachings. In fact, part of the intellectual excitement of the Enlightenment was precisely the demystification of the universe, that they have understood the universe in the scientific and what is more touted, the rational way. Already as early as the 16th century, Luther claimed that God's divine nature was limited to God himself and did not permeate society or politics. This is the emergence of secularization, of how certain ideas came to be given to this world. Luther claimed that God's divine nature was limited to himself and did not permeate society or politics. Hobbes was another great philosopher in the West, that after creation, God withdrew from the world. Newton, as we saw, reduced God's thoughts to mathematical formula. Nietzsche, who was another philosopher, declared that God was dead. And and Sartre finally explained that modern man has a hole in the consciousness in the shape of God, indicating that modernity had not come without a price. The price that we have paid through modernity, not in terms of science and technology, but in terms of spiritual outlook, is that we have sacrificed environment consciousness and replaced it with the idea of humans controlling the environment. Now, coming upon what the later philosophy said, which is about inclusive ecology and the evolution of the anthropocentrism, the West later understood that there were other beings other than humankind, and that had to be protected. And that was the post-anthropocentric world. In fact, we have literature to show that anthropocentrism is always human interest focused and non-human has only instrumental value to human beings. This we have realized after more than 200 years of environmental destruction and global warming. Ecocentrism is the opposite of it. The Eastern environmental consciousness, which we all spoke about yesterday at that this is Asia's century, is all about and going to be about ecocentrism. Ecocentrism is nature-centered, where humans are part of nature and non-humans have intrinsic value and they are as much stakeholders as human beings themselves. In other words, human interests do not take automatic precedence and humans have obligation to non-humans independently of human interest. Ecocentrism is therefore life-centered, nature-centered, where nature includes both human and non-human beings. This principle of ecocentrism is something which is special to the Eastern way of evolving consciousness. This philosophical revival has to happen everywhere. The emergence of understanding the sacred domain, the impact of modernity, the growth of science, which tended to, in some of its aspects, to wipe out the sacred domain, and the notion of the sacred between the East and the West, the distinction between the sacred and the profane, and ultimately how sacredness has fostered ecological security and protected wildlife. Today there's a shortage of food in many Asian countries. As long as food was worshipped as an aspect of the divine, yes, in history there were famines which were produced by nature, but they were not man-made. As long as water was worshipped, there was no water scarcity, the style and fashion of which we know of it today, probably in a country like India. All of this has to do with the evolution of the Eastern consciousness. And I must thank the organizers for giving me this wonderful opportunity, especially the Vivekananda International Foundation, and for everybody's patient hearing. Thank you.